Hello all, thank you for joining our all virtual Ceipal Connect, specifically Track 2 Ceipal University. We have a lot of material to cover, but before we jump into today's session, there are just a few quick items that we want to address. The first is welcome to Leah Daniels, our presenter for today. She's got a great presentation prepared on how to get the right candidates without spending more. It's going to be a great session, so you have a lot to look forward to. But just a couple keeping items. So first, there will be a 5-minute Q&A following the presentation. Please enter all your questions in the question tab, and we'll do our best to address each one at the end. The second point is that we are on a very strict schedule today, and we cannot go over the allotted half hour. So I will give a 5-minute notice to our presenter to ensure we get some time for Q&A. This session will end promptly at 11 a.m. So if your question didn't get addressed, please feel free to send them to contact@ceipal.com. And then we'll make sure that we get the relevant presenter to get back to you. Great, that's it. So I don't want to take up any more time. So I'm just going to quickly introduce Leah, and then we're off to the races. So Leah, thank you for being here. We're really excited to hear from you. Leah is currently the SVP of Strategy at Appcast Incorporated, the leading programmatic job posting platform. Since joining Appcast, Leah has helped employees, top recruitment ad agencies, job boards, RPOs, gig employers, and staffing firms understand their data in the context of the market. She helps firms find ways to lower their overall cost of candidate acquisition through programmatic ad buying. Prior to joining Appcast, Leah has held a number of roles in recruiting technology industry, including the Director of Product Strategy at Monster and Director of Global Alliances and Business Development at Bullhorn. Leah, we're so excited to have you here today. I know I've really been looking forward to your presentation. And with that, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me. I do have a very chock full of data and interesting stuff deck. So I am going to channel my inner roots of my New Englandness, and I'm going to talk fast so that we can get through a bunch of stuff that I think will be very useful for you all. Just a little bit more personally about me. I, like many of you, are living with children at home. I have a small human entering the 3rd grade. And despite all the things I talk about in the market, I am not an economist. I am not a virologist. And unfortunately, I am fresh out of crystal balls. Although I wish I could tell you guys what's going to happen in the next few months. We will start to look at that as we talk through some of these details of how we can make our money work better for us out in the market. So just 1 second about Appcast, and this is relevant in part because Appcast manages more data and more dollars that go into the performance ad marketing space than any other third-party platform. So this allows me to be able to pull significant data points out of the market and be able to provide that to you guys today. And I think that will be really helpful as you figure out how do you sort of rework your strategy into the fall as we are facing very uncertain and some changing times. What Appcast manages to do with all of this data is provide 2 really solutions. One of them is a job ad exchange, which allows us to put jobs out into hundreds and thousands of different job sites and get the right candidates back at the right price point based on what the market conditions are doing at that moment in time. The other piece that's very cool about that is it means you don't have to have relationships with thousands of job sites. It really does streamline the money and your relationship status with all these different organizations. On a broader scale, we then work with some companies to also do that approach, that management through programmatic, which allows us to set rules and understand what's working and what's not working on some of the other big job boards, such as Indeed out in the market. We call that Solution Premium. We've been around since 2014, and last year we're acquired by a company called Stepstone, which is out of Germany and a very large job site conglomeration across most of Europe. All right, let's get into it. State of the market. Well, it was all going swimmingly, and then February and then March happened, and you guys all know this, right? And so one of the things that occurred in March was for the first time in a very long time, we had more unemployed people than we had jobs available. And that is a really interesting statement because we have all been building all of our strategy for the last number of years, in fact, really 10 years of growth, right, on this idea that there weren't enough candidates for our jobs. So how do we optimize to get candidates through the funnel? And now the world has shifted and changed. And now we have far more candidates than we have jobs available. And part of you is thinking to yourself, I'm sure, like, let's go free, let's go Indeed and get that organic traffic. It's going to be great. And you should definitely do that. But something else interesting happened in the last few months, which is the CARES Act. And it really suppressed the candidate market to the degree that overall we saw it become much more competitive to find candidates in a lot of different industries and functions. So it's interesting because I believe as we go into August, we see the ending of the CARES Act, and now we may see a HEROES Act come through, right? Congress is considering that. But if we do see in the US that CARES Act discontinue and not be renewed, we're going to have a shift again in the candidate market. So we need to be thinking about all of these strategies as we're going into the fall. From an optimistic side, things are improving, which is good, right? We are seeing job growth come back. We are seeing people go back to work. Furloughed employees are being called back, and this is a good thing. But on the other hand, we are also seeing COVID cases rising. We are seeing more states reverse plans and are starting to shut down again. And so we are already seeing the second wave of people who were unemployed, reemployed, go back on unemployment. And so again, the market is shifting really fast. It's changing a lot. And so we have to be very dynamic. We have to be very agile in our recruiting as we think about how to manage through the fall and into next year. All right, so let's talk about recruiting. So uncertainty abounds. I think I just covered that, right? The CARES Act, high unemployment. We are looming a recession. One of the things that's happening in the U.S. market, and particularly focused on the U.S., so I apologize for those of you who are global. We are starting to see the recession feed upon itself, which is a scary time, right? It was one thing if we shut everything down, we did a V recovery, we made it back into happy times, and everyone went back to work. But right now, what's happening is we're starting to see that layoffs upon layoffs upon layoffs. Right? United Airlines is laying off a third of their workforce. We're seeing Chapter 11 from a number of different retail establishments. This is starting to become a more classic recession. And so one of the things that I think we'll see as we look forward will be some behaviors that would be more typical in a recession like 2008 or 2001, 2002. For those of you guys who remember those times. Those behaviors haven't been prevalent recently, and I think we're going to start seeing more and more of that. On the other half of this, you still have to hire people. You still have to get your job done. You still need to keep working, right? If the businesses aren't thriving, then we are in much worse shape. So how do you find efficient strategies to make sure that you can continue to do that and hire folks and be successful? I always say this, hard to fill jobs are hard to fill for a reason. It doesn't matter what the economy looks like. And if you're a recruiter and you're worth your salt, you know that those are going to be the jobs that are going to be really tough. One, because those are the people that won't be laid off, and they also are the ones that people aren't necessarily going to be looking for a new opportunity right now. They're going to stay put. So those jobs are going to get harder, not easier in the upcoming months. And for those of us who have sort of ignored this problem for a while, I have bad news. The black hole that we hear about from candidates is coming back, and it's probably going to get worse, right? The opportunity for 1,000 people to apply to a job is real, and you may find yourself walking in on a Monday morning to that. So we need to start thinking about strategies to manage through that part of the process as well. All right. The way I have organized this information, just for your sort of edification, is I like recruiter level fixes. So things that a recruiter can do, things that you can change if you are just a recruiter level, right? That doesn't need the whole organization to weigh in on it. Some of these things are more team level that you guys could, as a recruiting organization, address. And some of them are going to be bigger. So you may need to bring in folks from your other parts of the business in order to get help, in order to accomplish some of these things. The good news is all these tips that I'm going to provide you will not cost you money, but they may cost you some political capital. So let's jump in. Before you do anything, please baseline your data. So one of the things that can really be bad for us as a business is if we don't spend the time to understand how we're doing to begin with, we won't know if we have improved. And so part of being successful in any sort of improvement strategy is really understanding where you started from so you can know if you've made it to an improved place. The best thing to do is to start with your key events in your workflow. So what are those key events? Those could be anything from how many clicks you get to how many applications you've gotten to how many people your recruiter says are qualified to be, and that might be a phone screen, a passes phone screen, for example, or even gets submitted to a phone screen. You may say, no, I want to know how many interviews I've done, but identify these key events, right? And then we start to track conversions around those events. So how many clicks to get to an application, how many clicks to get to a quality application, passes phone screen, right? Or qualified application. How many clicks to get to a hire, how many applications to get to a hire, right? So all of those, the math between the two key events are conversion events. And watching those conversion events are really important. And here's why. When you look at just key events, clicks go up, clicks go down. Well, lots of that can be function of the market. It can also be a function of your number of jobs you have available. And so you don't want to get fixated on the key event numbers. What you want to get fixated on is the conversion rate between those numbers, because that will bring your apples to apples and allow you to start to really understand if things are getting better or worse in your process. The last piece in all of that is all of those numbers are important. They're even more important when you put your dollars against them. So if you are spending money, make sure you're tracking the dollars at each one of those events. So how much do your clicks cost you? And you might say, well, I have slots. How do I do that? Well, then you need to look at how much you spend on slots and then how many clicks you get out of it, right? And so you can always find an effective cost no matter what you do. Once you have all of that in place, then you can start to commit to fixing things. And that's where we're going to jump into. Last thing, I was just mentioning calculating costs, right? The one thing to make sure you're clear on is that pay per action. So I call pay per action any pay per click, pay per apply, pay per hire, whatever you're paying for is your action, right? And keep in mind that's a function of supply and demand. Oftentimes those numbers move based on what's available from a candidate perspective and who else is looking for them. The number of actions you need to get to an apply or to a hire is really that conversion rate that's important, but you need to track that from a cost perspective. And remember, the less actions you need at the top to get to the thing at the bottom is the win, right? That's always where we're after. A little bit of data from the market right now. So one of the things that I do track is what cost per click is doing in the market. And something that's been very interesting to me is since January 1, cost per click is up about 41%. That's that supply and demand thing I just mentioned. So supply candidates have been non-existent through these last few months. And I know it sounds crazy, but I bet a lot of you are feeling it, right? You're noticing that people aren't applying for your jobs, especially if you have hourly jobs. And that is, again, because the CARES Act has been paying them in such a way that it isn't actually conducive for them to go forth and apply for jobs. On top of that, our apply rates over the last 6 months are down about 34%. Apply rates are a person's willingness to finish completing your application. So going through whatever gauntlet you might put in front of them. And that could be something as simple as clicking on the Indeed apply button, or it could be the 34 pages in their life history that you'd like to get from them. But people's willingness to complete the applications are going down and have continued to go down since the beginning of the year. Why is this happening? Well, again, we have more people who are potentially looking at jobs now, but they're not going through the application process. They're not finishing it. And they're doing it more and more on the mobile device. So again, I say this a lot, but if you're looking at your applications and you're not looking at it through your phone, you're missing an opportunity because more and more people are now using that mobile device as their only source of how they apply for jobs. And then the cost of candidates, right? So that's a function of both those two things I said, CPA, the supply and demand, CPC, the supply and demand, and apply rate, right? Which is that willingness to complete. When you put those two together, you end up with cost per application. And since January, it's up 113%. So if you're finding that you're spending more to buy candidates, you're not crazy. It's what's happening as a function of what's going on in the US market. All right, let's dive in. So these are the things I was just mentioning. CPCs were up anyway in 2020 over 2019. So here we see the bits by industry. So some industries are obviously influencing that cost infrastructure more. But one of the things you need to remember if you're trying to not spend more is you may have to spend more. What do I mean by that? It means you may need to spend more on a CPC basis in order to get less cost on the application side. So what happens is if you bid too low, you end up buying remnant traffic or people who aren't really a good match. They're on page 3 or 4 or 5. They're not who you actually want. So for some companies, the key to success to spend less is spend more. And I know that sounds really crazy, but it's hard to know this. And so you may need help. Feel free to seek help for something like this. And certainly let me know if you guys would like some information on how to figure out the right price point of what you should be paying. And remember, it does change by state. So the state you're sourcing out of may be very different from, if you're trying to find someone in California and somebody in Pennsylvania, your price points actually should be different. And that's pretty tough to do manually. So again, think about technology that might be able to help you. Here's a big one. The day of the week in which you post your job matters, right? So apply rates are a proxy for cost. And so one of the things you should remember is higher apply rates mean better days of the week. And what we find is the most candidates apply on Mondays, and they are more willing to complete an application on Monday than any other day of the week. So for you, in order to just get free extra boost, post your jobs either late Sunday night or early Monday morning. And all of a sudden you will actually get a boost in traffic and you will get more willingness to complete applications. The cost of someone applying on a Monday on average is about $5 less from a per application basis than it is on a Saturday. That adds up. So think about it, right? How can you make sure you get more for your dollars without spending more? Post your jobs on Mondays. The next thing you can do, think like a candidate, right? I love all the titles that people come up with. They're very creative and very markety and not helpful. Candidates are more attracted to simple titles, but more importantly, the job boards are more willing to serve your job to candidates if they exact match what the candidate typed in. So the candidate is looking for a customer service role. They type in customer service. Don't do anything more than that. Don't put lots of other words in. Be simple. Think like a candidate. The less you have in your title, the more likely somebody will, one, see it, click on it, and more importantly, complete your application. On the team level, a few things. Mobile. Guys, I can't say it enough. In fact, this is going through 2019. As we went into 2020, we are seeing about 65% now of clicks coming from a mobile device and over 60% of applications. That means that people are more likely to go through your experience on their phone than they are on a desktop these days. If you have not invested the time to make sure that people are willing to finish that application, it's really important. Why? Because people are still abandoning the mobile device at a much higher rate than they are the desktop device. In average, here, I'll show you guys on this next page. On average, we're seeing the mobile activity go up, but really the apply rates for mobiles are under 5%, where desktop is still looming somewhere in the 5.5% to 6%. 1.5% doesn't sound like much, but over time it really does add up. In fact, we have in the system here a white paper you guys can download where I have broken down those costs so you can see how just 1 or 2 percentage points will matter in how your dollars flow out into the market, right? And how you are able to get more for less. So if you're interested, you can download that paper. I'm sure Sheila will explain that at the end for everybody. The next thing is if you are paying attention, your Glassdoor rating really does matter, especially in the professional space. If you have a Glassdoor rating over 3, it's really important you make sure everybody knows it. Put it right in your job description if you can. Put it on your career site. Most candidates who don't see a Glassdoor rating in the job description will leave your apply process to go to Glassdoor and check you out. If you are under a 3, it's unlikely they will come back and finish, right? We really see a big difference in people's willingness to complete applications if you are under a 3 versus over a 3. Finishing up strong here. Some other things that you can think about. Oh, and I see a sorry about the typo at the top, apply rate by length of application process, right? So what does that mean? How long it takes you to let somebody get through, right? If it's more than 15 minutes to get through your application process, people are leaving. They don't have the attention span. Another thing you can do that's really simple is tell people at the beginning of the application process how long it's going to take them. Just set their expectations. So this is going to take you 7 minutes. Well, okay, I can spend 7 minutes. That you actually have engaged them longer just by telling them what you've got, what they have ahead of them. So something you can do is just put at the beginning of your application process how long it will take. Also, questions. The more questions you ask, the more likely they're to give up, right? So try to make sure your questions, and for me, questions is any box they have to fill out. First name, last name, middle name, doesn't matter. That's a question. All of that counts. And so if you are asking for middle name, which is probably unnecessary, a PO box, which is definitely unnecessary, if you're asking for former employer information or a lot of history that you could probably get on a second conversation, then you are creating friction between how you get someone through the application process and and what you're really after, which is trying to get people to say yes and tell you who they are. And then we have the black hole problem. The way I like to think about this black hole problem, just so everybody knows, as I try to think about it from the perspective of a candidate, right? Jobs go out to the market, they see a job, they think to themselves, oh my gosh, I can do this job. Whether or not they're qualified or not is a secondary problem that we're going to address in a moment. But the reality is you only need X number of qualified candidates. That's all you need. Once you have that, you should stop advertising the job unless you want to continue to spend money out in the market and deal with all of the people who are going to start applying who don't know you have all the qualified candidates you need. You're going to now have to disposition and deal with them. This is where brand matters, right? People will remember that you never called them, even though they feel that you should have. And so here is where you have to start thinking about job management. How do I get the jobs out of circulation? Because no one ever got mad at you for not applying to a job they never knew about. They only get frustrated when they see the job, they go through that effort, they put in the time that you've asked them to put in for no good reason. So it's really a humanizing moment for everyone to think about how can they manage this black hole. And we think about it through programmatic. So programmatic is a platform, it's an approach that allows you to manage the job inventory you have out in the market to make sure you get candidates on every one of the jobs that you're looking for, but not too many. As we look forward into the fall and the world is crazy, I would suggest some sort of plan like this. Start with all your jobs going to an organic option, anything from Indeed's organic to jobs.com or any of the other alternatives in the market. Give them 24 hours. At 24 hours, you should know if you're getting enough activity to hit your goals for that particular job. And if you do, get those jobs out of market as soon as possible. Then only spend where you have to spend. So on your medium to hard to fill positions. In order to do that effectively now in this market, you may find you need to expand your reach. You may have to go out to more than one site. You may need to find those candidates in lots of different places, turn over all the rocks, right? So think about things like through a job ad exchange. But then here's the key. You've got to watch for quality. You've got to make sure the people coming in are qualified, and you need to start taking out sources that don't produce qualified applicants. It's one of the scary things about organic traffic is that it is definitely less qualified as an overall statement. How can technology do this? Well, it can get jobs out that only to market that need candidates. It can pull jobs when you have enough. But here's the kicker. It can figure out how much you need to be spending. And this is the hard thing to do, right? As I was mentioning, right? Prices are going up, apply rates are going down. All of these data points are coming in at a very fast rate and changing really fast. You can't use 2019 data. That's worthless right now to make decisions in July of 2020. So you need to find other alternatives, and technology is probably your best option. Data signals will help you figure out where the qualified candidates are living, and expansion of where you're going and finding all those rocks to turn over are really key for those harder to fill positions. Coming in at the end here, guys, Programmatic job postings work through a rules-based mechanism, right? So we use rules to understand the things you want with this job. Is it a high volume job where you want lots of applicants because you're going to be putting people out to work constantly as an evergreen type position? Or is it more of a one-off and you need to be very tight in what you're doing and where your money is going? If a job doesn't get enough candidates, make sure you are as quickly as possible sponsoring jobs, putting money against jobs that aren't getting enough candidates. Job boards age jobs. As they get older, they treat them as if they're not interesting anymore. And so they push them to the back. They don't serve them up as much. So you really have about 3 to 5 days as a job comes to market to really get the most out of it that you're going to get. After that, you have to spend a lot more on that job for the same kind of activity that you would normally have gotten in the early part of the job's life. And then make sure you pay only until you have enough candidates. Don't keep paying. What's going to happen in the market, lots of candidates are available. You're going to find that you're going to be paying for thousands of clicks you do not want. And that gets very expensive very fast. And the job ad exchange, last thing here, will help you really reach out to every job site. You do not want to manage all these separate relationships. This allows you to have one invoice, one person to work with, one organization that will then balance all the different sources of candidates while getting all the data to understand where are the candidates coming from today. So key takeaways for you all. The only thing that's certain is definitely things are uncertain. Plan for what you can, and then you need to plan everything else around flexibility. A lot of our existing models and trends are no longer reliable. So what we know happened last year isn't really a useful way to think about the world today. And make sure you're using real-time data on the fly to make changes in your strategy and in your real-time practices. So actually it's a little bit redundant. So let's go to this last slide. And Sheila, how did I do on timing?
You are great. We have 5 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to open it up. We have 2 questions here that look like they got upvoted. So I'm just going to pitch them to you really fast, and we'll end promptly at 11. But first of all, Leah, thank you so much. It's a great presentation, very data packed. I'm sure everyone appreciated it. Everyone, for your reference, if you, on your right-hand menu here where you've been entering your questions, if you go all the way to the right, there's a Docs tab. And underneath this Docs tab is a flyer from Appcast on how to win candidates without spending more. More on clicks. So I recommend everyone download this. It's a nice condensed version of Leah's presentation with all the information you need. Okay, beautiful. So really quick, I just want to ask 2 questions that got upvoted. So the first is, the attendees were wondering, any tips on how we can format and design applications, especially on our mobile devices, so people are more likely to finish the entire thing? So just like quick tips on that.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is make sure that it works on a mobile device. And I say that, and it sounds cheeky, but what I find is a lot of folks will try to make their computer screen smaller to see if it works. But they don't actually try it on their phone. So step 1, always try it on your phone. Step 2, make sure you do say how long it will take in order to complete the application. So be honest up front. 3, the resume is a killer. I got to tell you guys, people still don't carry the resume around on their phone. So if you're requiring it, you will find that a lot of people will abandon just based on that one alone. People really hate filling in information they've already given you, which means if they are able to give you a resume and you aren't able to populate information, they find that very frustrating for them to have to then fill in that information another time. They'll often abandon for that. This is a funny one. I was working with a company who had tell us what shifts you're available, which seems like a reasonable question, except that it was built on a computer at a desktop, and it required you to have an Alt key to multi-select. Well, guess what? You can't on the phone, on the way they had it. And then they had screening in the back that said if you picked only one shift to get rid of those candidates. So make sure your filters and what you're doing on the other side aren't actually adversely interacting with what you're requiring on your mobile device. It's a really interesting problem. So these are really detail-y things, but QA, and make sure you're thinking through, right? Oh, if I can't select multiple shifts, what am I doing to my my opportunities on the other side?
Okay, beautiful. I think that's all we have time for today. Well, here we have one more question that I'll run. Just want for some client projects, the information need to be filled by consultants. So, yeah. So I think we want to hear about for some client projects, we need the information to be filled out by consultants. So how do we get around that?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. We've also run out
Okay.
of time. So whoever the asker is, please do email me and I will make sure Leah gets back to you. Once again, everyone, thank you for attending. Leah, thank you so much for the presentation. This recording will be available on demand through the Ceipal website. If you have any other follow-up questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. We encourage you to tweet about this, use our hashtag CeipalConnect. And thank you, Appcast. Thank you, Leah. And tune into our next sessions. Thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Bye now.